A billionaire laughed in a poor boy's face and bet $100 million he couldn't win at chess. What he didn't know was that this child carried a gift from his dead grandfather, and a secret that would break him in front of the world. The afternoon sun was brutal over Whitmore Plaza, but nobody seemed to care. Not the executives in their tailored suits, not the assistants clutching iced coffees, and certainly not the man sitting at the marble chess table in the center of it all. Marcus Whitmore owned that plaza. He owned the building behind it. He owned half the buildings you could see from where he sat. And right now he owned the man across from him, a hedge fund manager named Patterson, who was sweating through his $3,000 shirt. "Your move," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who already knew how this would end. Patterson's hand trembled as he reached for his bishop. He moved it 2 squares. A desperate play. The kind of move people make when they know they've already lost, but can't admit it yet. Marcus didn't even look at the board. He kept his eyes locked on Patterson's face, watching the fear dance behind those expensive glasses. "Checkmate in 4, Marcus announced, moving his queen with a flick of his wrist. "But I'll let you figure out which 4. Patterson stared at the board. His face went pale, then red, then something worse. Defeated. The crowd around them erupted in applause, not because they admired Marcus. Most of them despised him, but they worked for him, or wanted to work for him, or needed something from him. So they clapped. They always clapped. "Better luck next time, Patterson." Marcus stood and adjusted his cuffs. His Patek Philippe caught the sunlight, throwing a brief flash of gold across the marble. "Oh, wait. There won't be a next time. Your fund is finished. I made sure of that this morning." Patterson's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked like a man watching his house burn down. Marcus turned to his assistant, a nervous young man named Gerald, who followed him everywhere with a tablet and a permanent expression of anxiety. "Who's next?" "I'm bored." Gerald scrolled through something on his screen. "Sir, there's been a situation." "A situation?" "There's a boy. He's been watching your games for 3 days now. Security has tried to remove him twice, but he keeps coming back." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "A boy?" "Yes, sir. He appears to be homeless, or close to it." Marcus turned slowly, scanning the edges of the crowd, and then he saw him. The boy couldn't have been more than 11 years old. He stood at the far corner of the plaza, half hidden behind a concrete planter. His clothes told his story before he could speak a word. A faded olive jacket with frayed cuffs, brown pants patched at the knees, sneakers so worn that the sole was separating from the canvas. But it wasn't the clothes that caught Marcus's attention. It was the eyes. The boy was watching the chessboard with an intensity that seemed out of place in someone so young. Not curious, not confused, focused, like he was studying, like he was learning. Something stirred in Marcus's chest, something he quickly suffocated. "Bring him here," he said. Gerald blinked. "Sir, are you deaf? Bring the boy here. Now." The crowd parted as security approached the child. Marcus watched the boy's reaction carefully. Most homeless kids would run. Most would cower, most would beg. This one did none of that. He walked forward with his chin up, his shoulders back, his eyes never leaving Marcus. There was no fear in his posture, no shame, just a quiet dignity that seemed almost impossible given his circumstances. The boy stopped 5 feet from the chess table. Up close, Marcus could see the hollows in his cheeks, the kind that came from skipped meals. He could see the dirt under his fingernails, the small scar above his left eyebrow. He could see a child who had been through more than most adults would ever face. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Elijah." The voice was steady, clear. "Elijah Turner. Elijah Turner." Marcus rolled the name around in his mouth. "And why have you been haunting my plaza for 3 days, Elijah Turner? Watching you play." "Watching me win, you mean?" "Watching you play," Elijah repeated. "You're good, but you're not as good as you think you are." A ripple went through the crowd. Someone gasped. Someone laughed nervously. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. When was the last time anyone had spoken to him like that? Years, maybe decades. People feared him too much, needed him too much. But this boy, this ragged, hungry, insignificant boy, was looking at him like he was just another piece on the board. "Is that so?" Marcus stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. "And what would you know about chess, street rat? Did you learn between begging for change and sleeping in doorways?" The crowd laughed. The ugly kind of laughter that people produce when they want to please someone powerful. Elijah didn't flinch. "My grandfather taught me," he said simply. "Every day for 7 years, until he couldn't anymore." "And where is this grandfather now? Did he teach you how to lose gracefully? Because you're going to need that lesson." "He passed away last winter." The words hung in the air. Marcus felt something flicker in his chest again. He crushed it. "Tragic," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But poverty and dead relatives don't make you a chess player, boy. They just make you a sob story." Elijah's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped slightly, and when he spoke again there was something new in it. Something that sounded almost like his grandfather's words coming through him. "My grandfather used to say that the people who underestimate you are giving you your greatest advantage." Marcus stared at the boy for a long moment. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He smiled. A real smile. The kind that made his eyes crinkle at the corners, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted something interesting to play with. "Gerald," Marcus said without looking away from Elijah, "how much is in my personal account right now?" "Sir?" "My personal account. The liquid one." "How much?" Gerald fumbled with his tablet. "Approximately $4.7 billion, sir." $4.7 billion. Marcus nodded slowly. "Elijah Turner, I'm going to make you an offer. Are you listening?" Elijah nodded. "I will give you $100 million. Right now, today. Transferred to whatever account you want. If you can beat me at chess." The plaza went dead silent. $100 million. The number hung in the air like something impossible, like something from a dream or a nightmare. Someone in the crowd whispered, "He's lost his mind." Someone else started filming on their phone. Then another. Then a dozen more. Marcus ignored them all. His eyes were locked on Elijah. $100 million, he repeated. "Enough to buy a house. Enough to buy 100 houses. Enough to change your life, your children's lives, your grandchildren's lives forever." He paused, letting the weight of the offer sink in. "All you have to do is beat me." Elijah stood perfectly still. His face revealed nothing. "And if I lose?" he asked. Marcus laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that echoed off the surrounding buildings. "If you lose, boy, you have nothing to lose. Look at you, you're wearing rags. You probably haven't eaten a real meal in days. What could I possibly take from you that life hasn't already stolen?" He gestured at the chess table with a flourish. "This is a gift, a chance that someone like you would never get in 1,000 lifetimes. All you have to do is sit down and play." The crowd was buzzing now. Phones were everywhere. Someone was doing a live stream. Marcus could already imagine the headlines, the viral clips, the story that would circulate for weeks. "Billionaire challenges homeless boy to chess for $100 million. It would be the greatest entertainment he'd provided in years. The boy would sit down, fumble through a few moves and lose within 10 minutes. Marcus would laugh, the crowd would laugh, and everyone would remember who Marcus Whitmore was. A man who won. Always. Elijah hadn't moved. He stood there looking at the chessboard, then at Marcus, then at something in the distance that no one else could see. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind, as clear as if the old man were standing beside him. "They'll underestimate you, Elijah. That's your greatest advantage." And then another voice, his grandmother's voice, from that morning in the hospital. Weak, fading, her hand in his, cold and thin. "Whatever happens, baby, I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you." The doctors had given her days. Maybe a week if she was lucky. The surgery she needed cost more money than Elijah could imagine. More money than he could earn in a lifetime of washing cars and collecting bottles. $100 million. Elijah's eyes refocused on Marcus Whitmore, on the expensive suit, the gold watch, the cruel smile of a man who had never known what it meant to be desperate. He thought about running, about walking away from this trap, this spectacle, this rich man's game. But then he thought about his grandmother, about the machines keeping her alive, about the doctors shaking their heads, about what would happen if he didn't try. Elijah Turner took a deep breath. And then he walked to the chess table and sat down. The crowd roared, cheers, laughter, disbelief all mixed together. Marcus clapped his hands with theatrical delight. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a challenger. The street rat thinks he can beat the king." Elijah didn't respond. He was looking at the pieces, white and black, perfectly arranged, waiting. His grandfather had given him a chessboard just like this one. Wooden pieces, hand-carved. They had played on it every single day until the cancer made it impossible for the old man to sit up anymore. "The board is the same for everyone, Elijah," his grandfather had said. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter. The pieces don't know who's moving them. They only know the truth of the game. Marcus sat down across from him, still smiling that predator's smile. White or black? He asked. Black, Elijah said quietly. I'll go second. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice. Most people want the first move advantage. My grandfather always said that patience wins more games than speed. Your grandfather, Marcus repeated with a sneer. Well, let's see if his lessons were worth anything. He moved his first piece, pawn to e4, a classic opening, aggressive, confident. The crowd leaned in, hundreds of eyes fixed on the small figure in ragged clothes sitting across from one of the richest men in the country. The phones kept recording. The whispers kept flowing. Somewhere in the back, a news crew was setting up a camera. None of it mattered to Elijah. He looked at the board. At the piece Marcus had moved, at the 64 squares that suddenly held his grandmother's life in the balance. Everything else faded. The noise, the crowd, the cruel laughter. All that existed was the board and the memory of his grandfather's hands guiding his own. He remembered the last game they ever played. His grandfather could barely lift the pieces by then, but he insisted, said it was important, said there was one more lesson he needed to teach. Elijah, the old man had whispered, his voice like dry leaves, when you sit across from someone who thinks they're better than you, remember this. They've already lost. Pride blinds people. It makes them see what they expect to see, not what's really there. But what if they are better, Grandpa? Then you make them forget that they are. You play so quietly, so carefully, that they don't realize they're losing until it's too late. That's the secret, boy. The best victories don't look like victories until the very end. Elijah blinked, returning to the present. Marcus was watching him with that amused, contemptuous expression, waiting, already celebrating a victory that hadn't happened yet. They'll underestimate you, his grandfather's voice whispered one more time. That's your greatest advantage. Elijah reached out with a steady hand. His fingers closed around the knight, the piece his grandfather always said was the most underestimated on the board. And he made his first move. None of them knew that Elijah had been preparing for this moment his entire life. And Marcus Whitmore had just made the biggest mistake of his. The knight landed on f6 with a soft click that seemed to echo across the entire plaza. Marcus glanced at the move and almost laughed, a standard response. Nothing special, nothing threatening. Exactly what he expected from a boy who had learned chess from some old man in a run-down apartment somewhere. Predictable, Marcus muttered, moving his pawn to d4. Let me guess, your grandfather taught you from a book published in 1950. Elijah didn't respond. His eyes moved across the board, seeing patterns that existed 3 moves ahead, 5 moves ahead, 10 moves ahead. His grandfather had called it the long vision, the ability to see the game not as it was but as it would become. The crowd pressed closer. More phones appeared. Someone was narrating into their camera, explaining the rules of chess for viewers who had never played. The words buzzed around Elijah like flies, meaningless and distant. All that mattered was the board. Marcus played quickly, confidently, each move designed to establish dominance. He was playing the Sicilian defense, one of the most aggressive openings in chess. It was a message. I'm not here to defend. I'm here to destroy. But Elijah had seen this before. His grandfather had shown him every variation of the Sicilian, every trap, every weakness. They had spent entire winters analyzing games played by grandmasters, finding the cracks that most people couldn't see. The Sicilian is like a man who talks too loud at parties, his grandfather had said once, moving pieces on their worn wooden board. He wants everyone to notice him. He wants everyone to be afraid. But underneath all that noise, he's just scared that someone will see through him. Elijah responded to each of Marcus's moves with patience. Not passive, patient. There was a difference. Passive players waited for their opponents to make mistakes. Patient players created the conditions for those mistakes to happen. 6 moves in, Marcus was still smiling. His position looked strong. His pieces controlled the center. To anyone watching, he was winning. But Elijah saw what Marcus couldn't see. A small imbalance in the structure. A weakness that would take another 4 moves to become visible. A door that was slowly opening. On the 7th move, Elijah reached for his knight again. And then he did something that made Marcus Whitmore's world stop spinning. Instead of moving to any of the expected squares, Elijah lifted the knight and placed it on a position that made no sense. It wasn't in any textbook. It wasn't part of any known strategy. It was a move that looked like a mistake, the kind of move a beginner might make by accident. But it wasn't a mistake. It was the inverted knight opening. Marcus stared at the board. His hand, which had been reaching for his bishop, froze in mid-air. His heart stopped, actually stopped for one terrible moment, before slamming back to life with a force that made his chest hurt. That move, that exact move. He had seen it before, not in a book, not in a tournament, not in any game played by any grandmaster in the history of chess. He had seen it on a Sunday afternoon 6 years ago in his office on the 47th floor. A small boy with messy brown hair and a gap-toothed smile sitting across from him at the antique chess table that Marcus kept for decoration but never used. Tommy, his grandson, 10 years old and already in love with chess, already creating his own strategies, his own openings, his own impossible moves that made Marcus laugh every time. "Grandpa, look, I invented a new move." "That's not how knights work, buddy." "I know, but what if they did work that way? What if you could surprise someone so much that they forgot the rules?" "Chess has rules for a reason, Tommy. Rules are boring. Surprises are better." The boy had moved his knight to that exact square, that exact position, and he had called it the inverted knight opening because the knight was facing the wrong direction, toward his own pieces instead of toward the enemy. It was nonsense. It was chaos. It was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. He had laughed so hard that tears rolled down his cheeks. Tommy had laughed too, and for a moment everything was perfect. The light through the office windows, the smell of the leather chairs, the sound of his grandson's joy filling a room that usually only heard the cold language of business. That was 2 weeks before the accident. 2 weeks before Marcus's phone rang 3 times during a board meeting, and he silenced it each time. 2 weeks before the voicemail he didn't listen to until it was too late. "Dad, I need you to pick up Tommy from school, please. It's urgent. Please answer." He hadn't answered. The meeting was important. The deal was worth billions. 20 minutes later, a drunk driver ran a red light. 20 minutes. That's all it would have taken. 20 minutes to save his grandson's life. Marcus had never told anyone about the inverted knight opening. It was Tommy's move, Tommy's invention, Tommy's gift to a grandfather who didn't deserve it. And now a homeless boy in a ragged jacket had just played it perfectly. The color drained from Marcus's face. His hand was trembling, actually trembling, something that hadn't happened in years. He felt cold, even though the afternoon sun was beating down on the plaza. Elijah watched him carefully. He had noticed the change, the sudden stillness, the way the older man's eyes had gone distant, focused on something that wasn't on the board. "Your move," Elijah said quietly. Marcus didn't respond. He was still staring at the knight, at the impossible position, at the ghost of a boy. He had failed. The crowd had gone silent. They could sense that something had shifted, even if they didn't understand what. The energy in the plaza had changed from entertainment to something else, something heavier. Gerald stepped forward, concerned. "Sir? Mr. Whitmore? Are you all right?" Marcus blinked. Once, twice. His eyes refocused on the present, on the board, on the boy across from him, on the hundreds of people watching. "Where did you learn that move?" His voice came out strange, hoarse, like he hadn't used it in years. Elijah tilted his head slightly. "What move?" "That one, the knight. Where did you learn to move it like that?" "My grandfather taught me. He called it the Turner opening. He created it when he was young. The Turner opening, not the inverted knight opening, a different name for the same impossible move." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen for 6 years, preserved in ice and denial and work and cruelty. How was this possible? 2 old men, 2 grandsons, 2 games of chess, and somehow, across different lives, different circumstances, different worlds, the same move. His grandfather had called it the Turner opening. Tommy had called it the inverted knight opening. Same position, same chaos, same beautiful rule-breaking nonsense. It wasn't coincidence, it couldn't be. The odds were impossible. It was something else, something that Marcus didn't believe in, but couldn't deny. It was like Tommy was sending him a message, through this boy, through this game, through 64 squares of wood and 32 pieces of carved stone. "I'm still here, Grandpa. I'm still playing." Marcus closed his eyes. Behind them, memories flooded in. Tommy running through the office, hiding behind furniture, laughing when Marcus pretended he couldn't find him. Tommy serious and focused during their chess games, biting his lower lip the way he always did when he was thinking hard. Tommy hugging him goodbye, small arms wrapped tight around his neck, warm breath on his cheek. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, buddy. Now go on, your mum's waiting." That was the last time, the last hug, the last words. Marcus opened his eyes and found Elijah watching him with an expression that was impossible for a child to have. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't confusion, it was understanding. "You lost someone," Elijah said. Not a question, a statement. Marcus couldn't speak. He just nodded, a tiny movement that the crowd probably couldn't see. "So did I," Elijah continued. "My grandfather. He was everything to me." "How long?" "Almost a year now." "Does it get easier?" Elijah thought for a moment. "No, but it gets different. The weight doesn't go away, you just get stronger, strong enough to carry it." Marcus stared at this child, this ragged, hungry, insignificant child, who was speaking words that therapists and colleagues and even his own daughter had never been able to find. You just get stronger, strong enough to carry it. He hadn't gotten stronger. He had gotten harder. He had turned his grief into armor and his pain into weapons. He had become the kind of man who destroyed others because he couldn't stand to be alone in his destruction. And now a boy with nothing was showing him everything he could have been. "Your move," Elijah said again gently. Marcus looked at the board, at the knight in its impossible position, at the game that had become so much more than a game. His hand moved on its own. He wasn't even sure what piece he was touching until he heard the click of it landing on a new square. It was a defensive move, cautious, uncertain. For the first time in 15 years, Marcus Whitmore was playing not to win. He was playing not to lose. Elijah nodded as if he understood. Then he moved his next piece, a pawn supporting the knight, and the game continued. But Marcus knew something had changed. Not just in the game, in him. The ice was cracking, the walls were falling, and somewhere deep inside, in a place he had sealed off and buried and forgotten, he could feel something starting to breathe again. He didn't know if it was hope or horror. He didn't know if he wanted it to stop or continue. All he knew was that this boy, this impossible, improbable, inexplicable boy, had walked through a door that Marcus had locked 6 years ago, and he wasn't sure either of them would be the same when they walked back out. The crowd was murmuring now. They had noticed Marcus's change. The confidence was gone, the arrogance had faded. Something was happening that none of them understood. But they kept filming. They kept watching. They knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. What they didn't know was that they were witnessing something far more important than a chess game. They were witnessing the first crack in a man who had forgotten how to feel. Gerald leaned toward one of the security guards. "What's happening? I've never seen him like this." The guard shook his head. "No idea. But look at his hands." Gerald looked. Marcus's hands, the same hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts without a tremor, were shaking visibly now. Not from anger, from something deeper, something that scared Gerald more than any boardroom tantrum ever had. On the other side of the table, Elijah remained calm, but inside his heart was racing too. Not because of the game, because of what he had seen in the old man's eyes when that knight moved. Recognition, pain, grief so deep it had carved canyons in the man's soul. Elijah knew that look. He had seen it in his own reflection for months after his grandfather passed. He had seen it in his grandmother's eyes every time she thought he wasn't watching. He saw it in the mirror every morning when he woke up and remembered for one terrible second that the person who believed in him most was gone forever. Whatever Marcus Whitmore had done, whoever he had hurt, he was carrying something that was crushing him from the inside. And somehow, through a chess move that shouldn't mean anything to anyone else, Elijah had touched that wound. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind one more time. "Never forget, Elijah. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, even the ones who seem like they have everything, especially those." The game continued, but it was different now. The arrogance had bled out of Marcus's moves. The cruelty had faded from his eyes. He was still playing, still fighting, but something fundamental had shifted. He was no longer trying to destroy a homeless boy. He was trying to survive a memory, and it was only the beginning. Marcus Whitmore hadn't lost a chess match in 15 years, but he was beginning to realize that losing the game was the least of his fears. The real terror was what this boy was making him remember, and what those memories might cost him if he let them back in. The crowd had tripled in size. What started as a few dozen curious onlookers had become hundreds. They spilled across Whitmore Plaza, pressed against the barriers that security had hastily erected, phones held high like digital torches in the afternoon sun. News vans lined the street. Helicopters circled overhead. Someone had set up a live stream that already had 200,000 viewers and climbing, but Elijah heard none of it. His world had shrunk to 64 squares, and the man across from him who was slowly falling apart. Marcus made his move, a bishop sliding diagonally across the board. It was a good move, technically sound, but there was no fire behind it, no aggression. The predator from an hour ago had become something else, something wounded. Elijah studied the position. His grandfather's voice whispered through his memory, analyzing, calculating, seeing paths that others couldn't see. The middle game is where truth lives, Elijah. The opening is just a handshake. The end game is just counting the bodies. But the middle, that's where you find out who someone really is. Grandpa Walter had said that on a winter night 3 years ago, the two of them huddled around a space heater that barely worked, playing chess on the board that Walter's own father had carved by hand decades earlier. Outside, snow piled against the windows of their tiny apartment. Inside there was warmth, not from the heater, but from the love between an old man and the grandson he was teaching to survive. Elijah moved his rook, a quiet move, patient, building pressure that Marcus wouldn't feel for another 3 turns. "You're good," Marcus said suddenly. His voice was different now, softer, almost respectful. "Really good. Your grandfather taught you well. He taught me everything." "Walter, right? You called him Grandpa Walter earlier, when you were talking to yourself." Elijah blinked. He hadn't realized he'd spoken aloud. The habit of talking to his grandfather, even now, even after almost a year, it was hard to break. Sometimes it felt like the old man was still there, sitting beside him, nodding approval at good moves and clicking his tongue at mistakes. "Yes," Elijah said. "Walter Turner. He was a janitor for 40 years. Cleaned office buildings at night so he could be home when I woke up in the morning. A janitor who played chess like a grandmaster. He could have been a grandmaster. Should have been." Elijah's jaw tightened slightly. "But back then, people who looked like us didn't get invited to tournaments, didn't get sponsors, didn't get chances. So he cleaned floors and taught himself from books he found in the trash, and he got better than anyone who ever had a chance." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he made his next move, another defensive play protecting his king. "Life isn't fair," he said. It wasn't a platitude, it was a confession. "No," Elijah agreed. "It isn't." The game continued. Move and counter-move. The board slowly tilting in Elijah's favor, though only a trained eye could see it. To the crowd, to the cameras, to the millions now watching around the world, it looked like a stalemate. 2 players locked in battle, but Marcus knew. He could feel the walls closing in, could see the trap that Elijah was building piece by patient piece. He should have been furious. An hour ago, he would have been. An hour ago, he would have swept the pieces off the board and declared the game invalid, would have had security drag the boy away, would have buried the whole incident under lawyers and money and power. But that was before the night move, before Tommy's ghost reached across 6 years of silence and touched him through the hands of a homeless child. "Why did you accept my challenge?" Marcus asked. "You could have walked away, should have walked away. Nobody would have blamed you." Elijah's hand hovered over a pawn. He didn't look up. "You really want to know?" "I really want to know." Elijah moved the pawn. Then he finally met Marcus's eyes. "My grandmother is dying." The words fell like stones into still water. Marcus felt them hit somewhere deep in his chest. "Her name is Ruth," Elijah continued, his voice steady but thin. "Ruth Turner. She raised me after my mom left, raised me after Grandpa Walter got sick. She's 74 years old, and she's been working 2 jobs her whole life just to keep us alive." Marcus said nothing. He couldn't. 3 weeks ago she collapsed at work. They took her to County General and ran tests and found something growing inside her. Something bad. Elijah's hands were still steady on the board, but his voice wavered for the first time. "They said she needs surgery. Said without it she has days, maybe a week." "And the surgery?" $200,000. Elijah laughed. A short, bitter sound that no 11-year-old should know how to make. "Might as well be 200 million. Might as well be all the money in the world. We don't have it, we'll never have it. The hospital put her on a list, but the list is long and her time is short. Marcus stared at the boy across from him. Really stared. Past the ragged clothes and the dirty fingernails and the hollowed cheeks. Past the calm exterior and the steady hands. He saw what was underneath. Terror. Desperate, choking terror. The kind that keeps you awake at night and follows you through the day and never ever lets go. This child wasn't playing chess for money. He wasn't playing for pride or glory or some abstract sense of justice. He was playing for his grandmother's life. "She doesn't know I'm here," Elijah added quietly. "Grandma Ruth would never let me do this. She'd say her life isn't worth betting on. She'd say I should be in school, not fighting battles I can't win." He moved another piece. "But she's wrong. She's worth everything. She's all I have left." Marcus thought about his own life, about the billions in his accounts, about the mansions and the yachts and the private jets, about all the things he had accumulated in 62 years of clawing his way to the top. None of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered. He had a family once, a daughter who loved him, a grandson who thought he hung the moon, and he had thrown it all away for meetings and deals and numbers on a screen. 20 minutes. That's all it would have taken. "When did you last see her?" Marcus asked. "Your grandmother." "This morning before dawn. I snuck into the hospital and sat with her for an hour before the nurses found me and kicked me out." Elijah's voice cracked slightly. "She was asleep. She doesn't sleep well anymore. The pain keeps her up. But this morning she was peaceful. I held her hand and told her everything was going to be okay. Did you believe it? No. But she needed to hear it. And I needed to say it." Marcus made his next move without thinking. His mind was somewhere else. In a hospital room 6 years ago, holding Tommy's hand while the machines beeped slower and slower, telling his grandson everything was going to be okay, lying through his teeth while his world collapsed around him. "I was there when my grandson died," Marcus heard himself say. "At the end, after the accident. I made it to the hospital in time to say goodbye." Elijah looked up, surprised that Marcus was sharing something so personal. He was unconscious, brain damage from the impact. "The doctors said he couldn't hear me, but I talked anyway. Told him I was sorry. Told him I should have answered the phone. Told him I loved him more than all the money and all the success and all the power I had ever chased." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper now. "Told him I would trade everything, every dollar, every building, every breath in my body, to have those 20 minutes back." The crowd had gone silent. Those close enough to hear were frozen, phones still recording but arms forgotten at their sides. "He squeezed my hand," Marcus continued, "right before the end. The doctors said it was just a reflex, just nerves firing randomly. But I know it wasn't. I know he heard me. I know he forgave me." A tear escaped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. "And I know I'll never forgive myself." Elijah sat perfectly still. In this broken man across from him, he saw something he hadn't expected. A mirror. They were the same. Different ages, different worlds, different circumstances, but underneath it all, they were two people drowning in the same ocean. Grief. Loss. The desperate need to hold on to someone who was slipping away. "Grandpa Walter used to say something," Elijah said softly. "He said that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, even the ones who seem like they have everything." Marcus let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Your grandfather was a wise man. He was the wisest man I ever knew, and the kindest, and the strongest." Elijah moved a piece, his queen, sliding into a position that threatened Marcus's entire defense. "He also said that a king without compassion is just a piece waiting to fall." Marcus looked at the board, at the trap that had been building for the last dozen moves, at the inevitable checkmate that was now 3, maybe 4 moves away. He should have seen it coming, would have seen it coming, if he hadn't been drowning in memories and guilt and the ghost of a boy who played chess on Sunday afternoons. "You've beaten me," Marcus said. "Not a question, a fact. Not yet. But soon." Elijah nodded slowly. "Soon." Marcus leaned back in his chair. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the plaza. The crowd was enormous, thousands of people, watching, waiting, holding their breath. "You know what the funny thing is?" Marcus said. "I've spent my whole life winning. Every game, every deal, every battle. I crushed anyone who got in my way, built an empire on the bones of people I destroyed." He looked at Elijah with something that might have been wonder. "And now I'm about to lose to a homeless child, playing for his grandmother's life. And I don't even mind. Why not? Because you deserve to win. You actually deserve it. Not because you're better at chess, and though you are, but because you're fighting for something real, something that matters. Marcus shook his head slowly. I forgot what that felt like. I forgot that anything could matter besides winning. Elijah considered this for a moment. My grandpa Walter said winning isn't the point. The point is what you learn while you're playing. The point is who you become. And who have you become, Elijah Turner? Elijah looked at the board, at the pieces arranged in their complex dance, at the victory that was almost his. I don't know yet, he said honestly. I'm still figuring it out. Fair enough. Marcus reached for his king, ready to make a move that would only delay the inevitable. But I'll tell you this. Whatever you become, I think your grandpa Walter would be proud. Elijah felt something warm bloom in his chest, something that had been cold for almost a year. I hope so, he whispered. I really hope so. The game continued, but something had shifted between them. They were no longer enemies, they were no longer predator and prey. They were just two people sitting across a chessboard, carrying weights that no one else could see. And somewhere, in a hospital bed across the city, Ruth Turner opened her eyes and whispered a prayer for a grandson she loved more than her own life. She didn't know what he was doing, didn't know about the chess game or the billionaire or the $100 million, but she knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with logic, that Elijah was fighting for her, and that whatever happened next would change everything. The board was tilting. The walls were closing in. Marcus Whitmore was about to lose a chess game for the first time in 15 years. But that wasn't what terrified him. What terrified him was the realization that losing might be the first step toward finding something he had buried 6 years ago. Something called hope. 3 moves. That's all that remained between Elijah Turner and $100 million. Between a homeless boy and a miracle. Between a grandmother clinging to life and a chance to save her. 3 moves. The sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, painting Whitmore Plaza in shades of gold and amber. The shadows stretched long across the marble, reaching for the chess table like dark fingers. The crowd had swelled beyond anything the city had ever seen for an impromptu event. 10,000 people pressed against barriers, spilling onto side streets, watching from windows of nearby buildings. The world was watching too. The live stream had crossed 5 million viewers. News networks had interrupted their regular programming. Social media had exploded with hashtags and hot takes, and millions of people who had never cared about chess suddenly caring very much about a boy named Elijah. But Elijah didn't see any of it. He saw only the board, only the pieces, only the path to victory that his grandfather had spent 7 years teaching him to find. Marcus Whitmore sat across from him, a man transformed. The arrogance had been stripped away, layer by layer, over the past 2 hours. What remained was something raw. Something human, something that looked almost like relief. He was going to lose. He knew it. Everyone knew it. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain, that was okay. Your move, Elijah said quietly. Marcus looked at the board. His options were limited now. Every path led to the same destination. He could delay the inevitable by 1 move, maybe 2, but the ending was written. It had been written for the past 20 minutes, slowly, methodically, by the steady hands of a child who played chess like poetry. He reached for his rook, and then his phone buzzed. Marcus froze. He had silenced his phone hours ago at the beginning of the game. It shouldn't be able to make any sound at all, unless it was an emergency override, the kind that only 3 people in the world had access to. His hand trembled as he pulled the phone from his pocket. The screen showed a name he hadn't seen in 6 years. Catherine. His daughter. The world seemed to stop. The crowd noise faded. The cameras disappeared. Even Elijah, sitting 3 feet away, became a blur. Catherine was calling him, after 6 years of silence, after 6 years of returned letters and blocked numbers, and a hatred so deep it had become its own kind of gravity. Catherine was calling. I need... Marcus's voice cracked. I need a minute. Elijah nodded, understanding without being told that something important was happening. Marcus stood on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else and walked 10 steps away from the table. His finger hovered over the answer button. Part of him, the part that had learned to protect itself from pain, wanted to reject the call, to silence it and pretend it never happened, to finish this chess game and go back to the life he had built in the ruins of his family. But another part of him, the part that had been waking up for the past 2 hours, knew that if he didn't answer, he would regret it for whatever time he had left on this earth. He pressed the button. "Catherine." There was silence on the other end. Then a breath. Then a voice he hadn't heard in 6 years, older now, tired, but unmistakably his daughter. "I'm watching you on TV, Dad." Marcus closed his eyes. Of course she was. The whole world was watching. "Catherine, Don't." The word was sharp, a blade. "Don't apologize, don't explain, don't give me any of the speeches you've probably rehearsed 1,000 times. I didn't call for that." "Then why did you call?" Another silence, longer this time. Marcus could hear her breathing, could almost see her standing somewhere with her phone pressed to her ear, fighting the same battle he was fighting. "Because I saw your face," she finally said. "When that boy made his move, the night thing, I saw your face and I knew what you were thinking about. Tommy." She was talking about Tommy. "I think about him too," Catherine continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Every day, every single day. I blamed you for so long, Dad. I needed someone to blame. And you were there. And you made it so easy. You never fought back. You just disappeared into your money and your empire and your cruelty." "I know." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "I know I did. But watching you today, watching you fall apart in front of millions of people because a homeless boy reminded you of your grandson," Catherine took a shaky breath. "I realized something. I realized that you didn't disappear because you didn't care. You disappeared because you cared too much, because the pain was so big that you had to become someone else just to survive it." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't try to stop them. "I'm not calling to forgive you," Catherine said. "I'm not ready for that. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I'm calling to tell you that I see you. For the first time in 6 years, I actually see you. And maybe that's a start." "Catherine," he couldn't find words, couldn't find anything except a lifetime of regret and a single, fragile thread of hope. "Finish the game, Dad, lose with grace, and then maybe we can talk, really talk, for the first time since Tommy." The line went dead. Marcus stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to silence. Then he slowly lowered it and turned back toward the chess table. Elijah was watching him with those ancient eyes, eyes that had seen too much for someone so young, eyes that understood things they shouldn't have to understand. "Everything okay?" Elijah asked. Marcus laughed, a genuine laugh, rusty from disuse but real. "No, nothing is okay. Nothing has been okay for 6 years." He sat back down across from the boy who had dismantled him. "But maybe it will be. Someday, maybe." He looked at the board, at his rook, still waiting to be moved, at the inevitable checkmate that loomed 3 moves away. "You know something, Elijah? I've made a lot of money in my life, billions of dollars, built companies, destroyed competitors, accumulated more wealth than 100 people could spend in 100 lifetimes." He shook his head slowly. "And none of it, not a single dollar, has ever felt as valuable as that phone call I just received." "Who was it?" "My daughter, Catherine, Tommy's mother." Marcus moved his rook, a futile defensive gesture, buying one more move of time. "She hasn't spoken to me since the funeral, blamed me for Tommy's death. She was right to blame me. But she called. She called, after 6 years of silence, because she saw me on television, falling apart over a chess move that reminded me of her son." Marcus met Elijah's eyes. "Because of you. Because you walked into my plaza and sat down at my table and played a move that nobody else in the world knows. Because you opened a door that I had bricked shut 6 years ago." Elijah considered this. "Grandpa Walter used to say that sometimes the worst things that happen to us are just doors to better things we can't see yet. Your grandfather was a philosopher. He was a janitor who read too many books." Elijah allowed himself a small smile. "But yeah, he was that too." The crowd was getting restless. 2 hours of chess had tested even the most dedicated spectators. People were checking their phones, shifting their weight, wondering when this would finally end. They would know soon enough. Elijah reached for his queen, the piece that would begin the final sequence, the piece that would end this game and change his life forever. His hand stopped halfway. Something was wrong. A commotion at the edge of the plaza. Voices raised in alarm. Security guards moving quickly towards something, someone, pushing through the crowd. Elijah turned, his heart suddenly pounding. And then he saw her, Grandma Ruth. She was in a wheelchair, pushed by a young nurse who looked terrified. An IV bag hung from a pole attached to the chair, tubes trailing down to Ruth's thin arm. Her hospital gown was visible beneath a hastily wrapped blanket. Her face was pale, drawn, exhausted, but her eyes were alive, blazing with a fire that her body could no longer match. "Grandma?" Elijah's voice came out strangled. "Elijah's, what are you, did you think I wouldn't find out?" Ruth's voice was weak but fierce. "It's on every television in the hospital, baby. Every single one. Nurses and doctors and patients, all watching my grandbaby play chess against some billionaire." She wheeled closer, waving off security guards who tried to stop her. Marcus stood and gestured sharply. "Let her through. Now." The guards parted. Ruth rolled up to the edge of the chess table, her eyes moving from the board to Elijah to Marcus and back again. "Grandma, you shouldn't be here. You need to rest. The surgery can wait 5 minutes." Ruth reached out and took Elijah's hand in hers. Her grip was weak, but her love was strong enough to anchor ships. "I needed to see you. Needed to tell you something before you finish this." "Tell me what?" Ruth pulled him closer, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, meant only for him. "I know what you're doing, baby. I know why you're doing it, and I need you to know that it doesn't matter. Grandma, listen to me." Her eyes were fierce now, burning with something that transcended her failing body. "If you win this game and that man gives you all the money in the world, it won't mean anything if you lose yourself in the process. And if you lose this game and walk away with nothing, you'll still be the richest boy I know. Because you have something that man never had. Something money can't buy." "What's that?" Ruth smiled, a smile that carried 60 years of wisdom and hardship and love. "You have a heart that knows what matters. You have your grandfather's gift, and you have me, baby. Win or lose, you have me, for as long as God gives us." Elijah felt tears spilling down his cheeks. He didn't care that millions of people were watching, didn't care that cameras were capturing every moment. All that mattered was this woman, this fierce, stubborn, beautiful woman who had raised him when no one else would. "I love you, Grandma. I love you too, baby, more than you'll ever know." She squeezed his hand one more time, then released it. "Now finish what you started. Show the world what a Turner can do." The nurse began to wheel her back, but Marcus spoke. "Wait." Everyone froze. Marcus walked around the table and knelt beside Ruth's wheelchair, the billionaire and the dying woman face to face. "Mrs. Turner, my name is Marcus Whitmore. I'm the man your grandson has been playing against for the past 2 hours." He took a breath. "And I want you to know that whatever happens in the next few minutes, whatever the outcome of this game, your grandson has already won something far more important than money." Ruth studied him with eyes that had seen through pretense for 7 decades. "And what's that, Mr. Whitmore?" "He's won my respect and my gratitude." Marcus's voice was thick, "because he reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. Something about what really matters in this life." Ruth held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Maybe you're not as lost as you think you are, Mr. Whitmore. Maybe not, thanks to your grandson." Marcus stood and returned to his seat. Ruth was wheeled to the edge of the crowd, close enough to watch, surrounded by security guards who had been transformed from obstacles into protectors. Elijah wiped his eyes and looked at the board. 3 moves, 2 now after Marcus's desperate rook. His grandmother was watching. His grandfather was watching from somewhere beyond, and 10,000 people in the plaza, plus millions more around the world, were holding their breath. Elijah reached for his queen. This time nothing stopped him. The endgame had arrived. 2 moves stood between Elijah Turner and everything he had ever dreamed of. But as he lifted his queen, he realized that his grandmother was right. He had already won the only victory that truly mattered. Whatever happened next was just the world catching up to what his heart already knew. Elijah's fingers closed around the queen. The piece felt different now, heavier, as if it carried the weight of everything that had happened in the past 2 hours. The insults, the laughter, the tears, the confessions, the impossible connection between 2 strangers who had nothing in common except grief. The plaza had gone completely silent. 10,000 people holding their breath, 5 million watching through screens around the world. Cameras capturing every angle, every expression, every heartbeat of this moment. But Elijah wasn't thinking about any of them. He was thinking about his grandfather, Grandpa Walter, who had worked as a janitor for 40 years so that he could be home every morning when Elijah woke up, who had taught himself chess from books other people threw away, who had never been given a chance to show the world what he could do. "The pieces don't know who's moving them, Elijah. They only know the truth of the game." Elijah moved the queen. It slid across the board with a whisper of wood against marble, settling into position like it had always belonged there. The move was elegant, precise, final. Marcus looked at the board. He didn't need to calculate anymore. He didn't need to search for an escape that didn't exist. The pattern was clear. The ending was written. One move remained. "Your turn," Elijah said softly. Marcus reached for his king. His hand was steady now, not because the trembling had stopped, but because he had accepted what was coming. Sometimes surrender was the bravest thing a person could do. He moved the king one square to the left, a meaningless gesture, a formality, the last breath of a battle already lost. Elijah looked at the board one final time. At the position his grandfather had shown him 100 times, 1,000 times, in their tiny apartment with the space heater that barely worked and the love that could warm an entire city. "When the moment comes," Grandpa Walter had said, "you'll know. And when you make that final move, remember, it's not about defeating the person across from you. It's about honoring everyone who believed in you, everyone who sacrificed so you could be there." Elijah picked up his rook and placed it on the final square. Checkmate. The word echoed across Whitmore Plaza like a thunderclap. For one eternal second, nothing moved, nothing breathed. The whole world hung suspended between what was and what would be. Then the plaza exploded, 10,000 voices screaming at once. Applause that sounded like a tidal wave crashing against the buildings. People hugging strangers, crying, laughing, capturing every moment on phones that couldn't possibly contain what they were witnessing. Elijah sat frozen at the table, unable to process what had just happened. His hand was still hovering over the rook as if he couldn't quite believe he had let it go. He had won. A homeless boy in ragged clothes had just defeated one of the richest men in the world at chess for $100 million. Marcus Whitmore stared at the board for a long moment, at the pieces arranged in their final configuration, at the checkmate that had been inevitable from the moment a child played a move that only his dead grandson had ever known. Then he did something that nobody expected. He smiled. Not the predator's smile from 2 hours ago, not the cruel, calculating expression of a man who enjoyed destroying others. This was something different, something that hadn't touched his face in 6 years. It was the smile of a man who had finally lost something he needed to lose. Marcus stood slowly and extended his hand across the table. "Congratulations, Elijah Turner. You've earned this." Elijah looked at the hand, at the man attached to it, at everything that had passed between them since he walked into this plaza 3 days ago and started watching games he wasn't supposed to understand. He reached out and shook Marcus's hand. The crowd roared even louder. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions that nobody could hear over the chaos. But in that handshake, something passed between the billionaire and the boy. An understanding, a recognition, a promise that neither of them spoke aloud, but both of them felt. This wasn't just the end of a chess game. It was the beginning of something else. At the edge of the plaza, Ruth Turner was crying. The nurse beside her was crying too. Security guards who had spent their careers keeping their emotions hidden were wiping their eyes and pretending it was just the sun. Marcus released Elijah's hand and turned to address the crowd. His voice was rough, broken, but it carried across the plaza with a clarity that silenced everything else. "I made a promise," he said. $100 million if this young man could beat me at chess. And I am a man of my word." He pulled out his phone and made a call. Everyone watched in stunned silence as he spoke briefly to someone on the other end, then ended the call and looked at Elijah. "The transfer is complete. $100 million in an account that will be accessible to your grandmother as soon as the paperwork is finalized." He paused. "Which should be about 20 minutes from now." Elijah's legs gave out. He would have fallen if Marcus hadn't caught him, steadying the boy who had just changed both their lives forever. I don't know what to say," Elijah whispered. "You don't have to say anything. You earned this. Every penny." Marcus's voice dropped lower, meant only for Elijah. "But there's something else I want to do, if you'll let me." "What?" "Your grandmother needs surgery. I know the best doctors in the country. I can have a team at the hospital within the hour. The money will cover everything, the procedure, the recovery, whatever she needs for as long as she needs it." Marcus's eyes were glistening. "Let me do this. Please, not because I have to, because I want to. Because—" Elijah looked toward the edge of the crowd, where Ruth was still crying, still praying, still alive, because she had refused to give up on a grandson who had refused to give up on her. "Okay," Elijah said. "Yes, thank you." Marcus nodded and made another call, then another. Within minutes, arrangements were being made that would have taken ordinary people months to coordinate. But Marcus Whitmore wasn't ordinary. And for the first time in 6 years, he was using his power for something that mattered. The crowd began to disperse slowly, reluctantly. News crews packed up while still broadcasting. Social media exploded with clips and millions of people trying to understand what they had witnessed. But the real story wasn't happening in front of the cameras anymore. It was happening at the edge of the plaza, where Elijah had finally reached his grandmother's wheelchair. "Grandma!" Ruth opened her arms, and Elijah fell into them. They held each other while the world spun around them. The boy who had just won a fortune, and the woman who had raised him with nothing but love, and the memory of a man named Walter, who had taught them both what strength really meant. "You did it, baby," Ruth whispered into his hair. "You really did it." "We did it," Elijah corrected. "You and me and Grandpa Walter. We all did it together." Ruth pulled back to look at her grandson's face, at the tears streaming down his cheeks, at the joy and the grief and the relief all mixed together in an expression that no 11-year-old should ever have to wear. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she said. "So proud of the man you're becoming." "I hope so. I really hope so." A shadow fell over them. They looked up to find Marcus standing there, his hands clasped in front of him like a man approaching a church. "Mrs. Turner, the medical team will be at the hospital in 45 minutes. They're the best in the country. I promise you, you're going to get through this." Ruth studied him for a long moment. This man who had humiliated her grandson in front of the whole world. This man who had been transformed by a chess game and a memory and the impossible coincidence of two grandfathers who had invented the same move. "Mr. Whitmore, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "That move my grandson made. The one that changed everything. You recognized it, didn't you?" Marcus nodded slowly. "My grandson Tommy invented the same move 6 years ago. He called it the inverted knight opening." His voice caught. "He died 2 weeks after he showed it to me." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took Marcus's hand in hers, her grip weak from illness but warm with something that transcended words. "My husband Walter invented that move 60 years ago, called it the Turner opening." She squeezed his hand. "Two men who never met, two grandsons who never knew each other, and somehow, across all those years and all that distance, they created the same beautiful thing." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face again. He didn't try to stop them. "What do you think it means?" he asked. Ruth smiled, the same smile she had given Elijah when he was small, and asked questions too big for answers. "I think it means that some things are bigger than we are. Some connections exist whether we understand them or not. And maybe," she paused, looking at Elijah then back at Marcus, "maybe it means that the people we love never really leave us. They just find new ways to reach out, new hands to touch, new hearts to change." Marcus stood there for a long moment, holding the hand of a woman he had never met before today, feeling something crack open in his chest that had been sealed shut for 6 years. It wasn't forgiveness. He still had to earn that. It wasn't redemption. That would take longer than one afternoon. But it was something. It was a beginning. His phone buzzed. A text message from Catherine. "I watched the whole thing. I'm proud of you, Dad. Come see me when you're ready. We have a lot to talk about." Marcus read the message 3 times. Then he put the phone away and looked at the 2 people in front of him, a dying woman and the boy who had moved heaven and earth to save her. "I should go," he said. "There's someone I need to see." Elijah nodded. "Your daughter." "My daughter." Marcus took a deep breath. "It's been 6 years. I don't know if she'll forgive me. I don't know if I deserve it, but I have to try. Grandpa Walter used to say that the hardest moves are the ones that matter most." Marcus laughed. A real laugh, full and warm and completely unfamiliar on his own lips. "Your grandfather was right about everything, wasn't he? Almost everything." Elijah smiled. "He thought the Cubs would never win a World Series." Marcus laughed again, and this time it felt like medicine. "I'll check on your grandmother tomorrow," he said, "and the day after, and every day until she's back on her feet." "You don't have to do that." "I know." Marcus looked at the boy who had defeated him in front of the whole world. "But I want to. I think it's time I started doing things because I want to, not because I have to." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd that parted for him like water around a stone. Elijah watched him go. Then he turned back to his grandmother. "Ready to go home, Grandma?" Ruth shook her head. "Not home, baby. Hospital first. got some doctors to meet and a surgery to survive. She grinned, that fierce, stubborn, beautiful grin that had gotten her through 74 years of hardship, and then home, together. Elijah took the handles of her wheelchair and began pushing her toward the waiting ambulance that Marcus had arranged. Around them, the plaza slowly emptied. The chess table stood alone in the center, pieces still arranged in their final position. Checkmate. But for the two people leaving Whitmore Plaza, it felt more like the beginning of a game they were finally winning. And somewhere, in a place beyond boards and pieces and all the rules that humans create to make sense of chaos, two old men sat across from each other at a table made of starlight. Walter Turner and the grandfather Tommy never got to meet, playing chess for eternity. Both of them smiling. Both of them proud. Both of them knowing that the moves they taught would echo forever in the hearts of the people they loved. If this story touched something inside you, leave a comment. Sometimes, acknowledging what we feel changes more than we expect. Every word written here may help someone else who is also in silence.